And let me start the national discussion on this program this week with the energy and climate change shambles in this country, our national self-harm. We're in an energy crisis, of course. Our energy is getting increasingly expensive and our supply is increasingly unreliable. It's all driven by government policies. Can you believe government policies that have turned an energy-rich country into an energy-poor one? Energy policies committed to pushing renewable energy and forcing out fossil fuels like coal and gas. Now, of course, these energy policies are driven by climate alarmism and a panicked and unrealistic eagerness to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the reasons we don't get a rational, sensible debate about any of this is that the Green left, including the federal Labor government and the new Prime Minister, are obsessed with climate alarmism, spreading fear and misinformation, sadly, about global warming. And so we have the ridiculous situation where Anthony Albanese goes to South Australia's Riverland on the weekend to have a look at the flooding and the preparations to deal with rising waters, and he invokes climate change. He actually said this is Mother Nature at its worst, when it's actually the natural cycle of drought and flood that has created the Murray-Darling ecosystem over millennia. Now, the flooding is serious this time, to be sure, but the river flow levels are yet to reach the levels seen almost 50 years ago in 1974, still a long way short of the massive flood of 1956, that was 66 years ago, or the big 1931 flood of nearly a century ago. Yet the Prime Minister turns history and these facts on their head to pretend this proves things are now more extreme than they used to be. I mean, droughts, floods, fires, he just says it's all getting worse.
Climate change is real. We need a long-term response and it needs to be a global response, and Australia's got to be a part of it. And I've witnessed since I've been leader of the Labor Party, I've visited areas of tropical rainforests that have never burnt before, that have burnt during the bushfires during the summer of 2019, 2020. That came after, of course, a period of drought.
There you go, blaming both droughts and floods on climate change, but also citing bushfires in rainforests as an unprecedented event. I've asked the Prime Minister's office to cite the specific example that he's talking about there. We haven't heard back yet, because these claims have been made before and they've been easily disproven just by checking the records. Have a look at these examples that I fact-checked back during that horrible summer.
There's fires breaking out in places where they just shouldn't burn. The west coast of Tasmania, the World Heritage Area's wet rainforest, subtropical rainforest, it's all burning. And look, this is driven by climate change. There's no other explanation.
Well, he is an expert, he's worth reporting, but shouldn't such claims be tested? And Mullins, of course, as you heard, mentioned the west coast of Tasmania. We saw fires there earlier this year, and on this program we exposed emotive reporting suggesting this was unprecedented. It wasn't, of course. This report, for instance, in the South Australian Chronicle of February 1915, reported lives lost and the most devastating bushfires ever known in Tasmania, sweeping over the northwest coast and other districts. The extent of the devastation cannot be overestimated, it said. And as for Mullins' claims on rainforests, the rainforests of the west coast, there was this report in 1982 from the Canberra Times detailing a huge forest fire burning out 75,000 hectares of dense rainforest. As a scientist, what I find particularly disturbing about the current conditions is that World Heritage rainforest areas such as the Lamington National Park in the Gold Coast hinterland are now burning, she wrote. Well, we were busy too, but we were able to dig this out. It's the Cairns Post from the 25th of October 1951. A bushfire in Lamington National Park today swept through a grove of 3,000-year-old macrozamia palms. These trees were once the features of the park. The fire has burnt out about 2,000 acres of thick rainforest country. That's right, nearly 70 years ago, rainforest burning in Lamington National Park before global warming. Isn't anybody else interested in fact-checking these days? And yeah, just because you say something is unprecedented, just because that helps your narrative, well, it doesn't make it true. And people should check the records. And the Prime Minister should check his facts too. Anyway, this propensity to ignore the facts, ignore reality, continues when it comes to finding energy solutions too. For instance, there's been renewed interest today in the attitude of the South Australian Labor Premier, Peter Malinauskas, to nuclear energy. Remember, he's pretty logical about it, as he shared on this program just last month.
Chris, I'm on the record and have been for some time, well before I went into Parliament, that I actually think nuclear power does have a role to play, because the simple fact is it's a baseload source of energy that is decarbonised, virtually no carbon emissions. So it should be a technology that's on the table globally in our effort to decarbonise.
Yeah, Malinauskas reckons as soon as nuclear stacks up economically, he's into it. And he's also said that when Australia gets its nuclear-powered submarines, public attitudes will change, prompting this slapdown today from the Prime Minister.
I think you've got the issue of waste and you've got where it goes. So I think it's a distraction from what we need to do. That's my position, and it hasn't changed. I have a great deal of respect for Mally, but everyone's entitled to get one or two things wrong.
I keep telling you, nuclear power for Australia is inevitable. Every day we waste is just going to make it harder. Actually, it already stacks up economically, as the International Energy Agency has detailed. And federal Labor is in denial. When it comes to climate change and energy, the Green Left are science and fact deniers.